Now, there's another diagram that I like to use. This is the hourglass diagram. This is kind of, and next time we do this, they just told me that I can use this next time, so I'll have that figured out and it'll be up on the screen instead of being handed out later. But for now, this will do the job. This hourglass basically distinguishes between head knowledge, heart knowledge, and life knowledge, okay? Head knowledge is basically the stuff you learn out of books, the stuff you can learn in school. And it's open and available to anybody, okay? So exegesis is under the information subset, it's under the head knowledge subset, it's the kind of thing they teach in seminary. It's getting out of the way of a text and letting it speak for itself. Now we do this when we try to understand the culture and the language of that text, and from that understanding its form. Now believe it or not, we do this all the time. So for example, if you hear roses are red, violets are blue, you know you're reading a poem. If you hear, once upon a time there lived a princess in a high tower, you know you're reading a fairy tale. In the same way, when you read, the gunman was taken down by police 6 hours ago, you know that's a news report. So we're actually using form all the time, and it's a combination of culture and language, okay? This is a head knowledge issue, and it's at the top of the diagram, and it basically asks, what did the original writer intend, and what did the original reader understand? That is the head knowledge question. Now from there, basically the next thing to keep in mind is heart knowledge. Now heart knowledge is essentially a matter of what is known as depth exegesis. So we go from the book knowledge, the head knowledge, to the heart knowledge. This is formative. In our heart, when we come to know Jesus as revealed in the Gospels, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, as being the starting and finishing point of all of Scripture, that's Hebrews 12:2, we go through a deep reshuffling of our biblical knowledge. Now the head knowledge is moving from the top of the hourglass to the narrowest point. You'll notice there's a heart right at the narrowest point of the hourglass, because when we receive Christ into our lives, then everything we know gets reorganized by Him, to be about Him and how He comes to work in our lives and uses us and our lives to help others. And so it very much opens over time. The more our heart opens, the more the narrow part of the hourglass opens, the more head knowledge moves through heart knowledge toward life knowledge. Now, life knowledge is a little bit of some of the stuff we're doing now, and it's part of what comes through the transformation of Christ. So if the first is information, and then the middle is formation, when you put these two together, you get transformation. Now, transformation are like the two legs we walk on. We're going to do also much better using both. And this way is one way that God reshapes us into the image of Christ. That's Romans 8:29. God changes us with our cooperation. So like physical fitness, spiritual fitness requires good practices over time, such as being in Bible studies like we're doing right now, spending time in prayer, helping others, and regular fellowship with other believers. So consistency and the state of our heart. Why are you doing this good thing? Are you here because you felt guilty if you didn't come? Are you here because you want to know more? Are you here because it helps your brother for you to be here? It's a very much the head knowledge through the heart knowledge to the life knowledge, information to formation to transformation. And the last thing I'm going to talk about on this diagram, and next time we'll have it up on the screen, is depletion. I put a little trapdoor at the bottom here, because as the sand pours from the top through the heart and into the transformed self that we're living, if we have addictive or compulsive behaviors, if we have a sin that so easily besets us, it can rob us of our transformation. It's a little bit like working out really hard and then going home and eating an entire chocolate cake. Sure, you did work out, but how much are you really going to benefit from the work you're doing? You got to close that trap door as well as let the heart be open. So let me take a second to talk about the middle of the hourglass, Christ, depth exegesis, where the head knowledge moves through the heart into our lives. This is called the shadow of the cross. And the idea here is that the cross stands at the center of history. And when it casts its shadow back on everything that went before or everything that goes after, we experience what happened to the disciples on the Emmaus Road. In Luke 24, after the death of Christ, and he'd been resurrected, some of the women had seen him, but the disciples at that time were not really with it yet. They're walking down the road, and Jesus shows up, and he's like, so what are you guys so upset about? And so they tell him, and it says in Luke 24:27, it says, Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And after he broke bread with them and they realized who he was, they say to each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road? And Jesus opened the scriptures to us. Because see, Jesus, as described in the four Gospels, is God's final word about himself to us today. He's the final standard by which we measure all scripture and was foreshadowed in the Old Testament. So through Christ and his cross, we have a lens to view the Bible, and through that all of life. That's one of the reasons why knowing the Gospels is so critical.